coming out. It's a beautiful evening. We have some great guys here to share with you all about their work in software development. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce them, and they are going to share all of their knowledge with you. So Tim Lanahan graduated in 2010, and his lovely wife Dorothy and their youngest son Henry, right? Yes, are here. Tim spent 3 years teaching before going to George Mason University and earning his master's degree in systems engineering. He's been working for over 5 years as a software developer and is currently a senior associate software engineer at Capital One in the DC metro area. And then we have Bennett Ellis, who graduated with Mr. McFadden back in 19-something. Earned his BA in philosophy before entering the tech world. He has worked as a chief software architect for Novus CG and IBM Global Services, as well as a development manager for Ingo. Did I say that correctly, Ingo? Okay, close enough. He recently founded his own software company, Slice LLC, where he serves as the chief technology officer. So give them a round of applause and your attention.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. As you heard, my name is Bennett Ellis. Let me just open up my notes here for a second. Okay, so you probably didn't come here to hear a lot about me and more about the career. But if I gave you nothing about me, you'd probably wonder who this guy is and why he has the credentials to be talking to you about the career in technology. So give you just a few minutes about me, and then we can talk a little bit about the career, your daily activity in the career, kind of some of the ups and downs of the career, and then I guess what I'd like to leave you with as well is a bit of advice related to any career that you choose, and specifically around technology. So I grew up in California. It's one of 8, large family. Most of my sisters went to Thomas Aquinas College. I ended up coming here to Christendom College. My sister and my brother came with me, and graduated in 1991, Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy. Let's see, as you know, was here with Tom. Back when Doug Briggs was just in his early days as running the IT department here, running all the technology here. And you know, actually back then I worked for Doug for a semester. I'm not even sure what I did actually. It was something to do with paper and folding stacks of paper or something like that. It made no sense to me at the time actually. And see, so when I graduated, my wife, my girlfriend at the time, my fiance at the time, Mary Beth, and I were going to get married. And I was really kind of searching for a career. And I looked at a lot of different things. I really, I kind of scoured the world and kind of said, well, what do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? And I had some history in my early days of actually working with some technology. My dad actually owned a small computer repair shop. So I worked with him on and off, and I had some early exposure to technology. I used 400 baud modems. Probably nobody in this room has any idea what I'm even talking about. It's way back from the early days. Anyway, so after college, searching around for a career, and landed a job in Connecticut as a computer helper for a small nonprofit, and took it. And from there, I just learned as much as I could. I poured myself through Novell network manuals at the time, software, C++, C. I learned everything and anything I could to start my career off, and it was trying. It was hard. And back then, all we had was books. We didn't have access to the internet. The internet was kind of coming to life at that time, right? So you all today have the advantage of technology at your fingertips, literally at your fingertips. Access to a wealth of information, a wealth of education around technology that we did not have back then. So you should be taking advantage of that. So you had kids, studied, grew my career, went from nonprofit to for-profit industries. Worked in small companies and went from company to company, and eventually, I was with a small company that was bought by IBM, and worked with IBM for about 7.5 years, and then decided to kind of go out and start working again with a smaller company. Worked for another small company for a short while, and then decided to branch out on my own. So that's where we are today. It's a fairly new company. We're about 6 months old, so. Still in our infancy. So all in all, I've been doing this about 27 years. And some of my career has been spent in cloud development as well. So I've been in the IBM cloud division, and I've also been working in cloud probably for the last 6-7 years. So I've been doing a lot of cloud work. All right, so I was told that there are probably a handful of you in this room who are interested in technology, really, who are dedicatedly interested in technology and technology as a career. And maybe some of you are here because maybe it's one of the things you have to do to get through your senior year or that kind of thing. I want to tell you, tech runs the world. Tech runs the world. Tech is getting bigger and bigger. There are 1 million unfilled tech jobs right now. Tech runs the world. Tech is only going to get bigger. So if you're not considering a career in technology, you should be. Should be at least 1 in 5 of you looking at a career in technology, because it's not going away. And you're going to shape it, and you're going to help it to grow and become something that's good for mankind. Or you're going to get, you're going to be left in the world that exists, 10 years ago. It's not to say that other jobs are menial or that, there's no room for other kinds of work. But tech is here, and tech is not going away. Tech is only going to get stronger. More and more things that you do daily are going to be taken over by technology. More and more, you're going to find that simple things that you thought, there's no way they could modify that to where it's some kind of an automated, tech part of our world, and they will. They'll find a way, right? So big piece of advice to you guys, especially the guys. Put away the distractions. And specifically, I mean gaming and social media. Put it away. If you spend an hour on it a day, that might be okay. No more. You got a lot of time that is being wasted in gaming, wasted in social media, wasted in other things. Learning technology takes time, but you can do it. And one of the things that's really, really interesting about technology today that, I mentioned before that when I was coming up in the technology field, I had books. I had systems that were harder to get access to, where if I wanted to learn something, I'd have to get some kind of access to some kind of a system in order to practice that, right? And now with the cloud, you have access at your fingertips. You could create a cloud account in 5 minutes. You can stand up a server in 5 minutes. You can get access to that server. You could play around on that server all day long, and it might cost you $5. Right? The technology and software world has changed quite a bit to where the cost of entry for a software developer, for anybody who wants to get in the technology field, is really, really low and really, really accessible. Also, you have things like Udemy. You have things like Code Academy. Get an account. learn. It's easy, it's fast, it's cheap. And it's all accessible, it's all available to you. And here's another thing that I really want to leave you with is I've heard over and over in my career, people tell me, well, I'm not really good at math. I'm not really that scientific, right? The technology world, while there's a lot of math in things like signal processing and other things that are very low-level technical aspects of the technical world, most of what you do actually in software development is logic. It's plain and simple logic. You don't need math. I use math maybe once a month. And it's mostly to add two numbers together, right? It's not to use to come up with some complex algebraic equation that is going to solve this problem or that problem. It's not the way programming really works. So if you're thinking that a tech career is not for you because you're not good at math, you're not good at science, don't let that be a barrier. Get on, learn. Test it out. $10. You have a course. You can learn something, and maybe it'll be the beginning of a new career for you. Okay. Let's see. What other things? What are developers like? Maybe that was one of the things that I really kind of wanted to talk about. I think there's a little bit of a stereotype about what a developer is like as well. And it's interesting. I think developers run the gamut, right? But many of them are actually do-it-yourselfers, self-sufficient, and they like process. And I don't mean process like forms to fill out, check boxes to check. I mean process like I like the process of making something. I don't really as much enjoy the finished product. I like process. So I like to cook. I like to garden. I like to do a lot of things like that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's very rigid with math and science and very directed and focused in that way. It kind of runs the gamut. I know a software developer who and also don't be afraid to kind of change your careers as you go forward in the next few years as well. I know a guy who is a doctor of zoology. He went through lots and lots of schooling, got his doctorate in zoology. About 10 years into his career, he kept having his lab mice stolen. They'd break into his lab and they'd let him out. And very expensive mice, apparently. He got kind of tired of it. And he realized at the time that he was actually doing a lot of scripting in order to get any of the math that he needed to get done or the science that he needed to kind of process. He was doing a lot of scripting to make that happen. And he realized he liked that a lot better. So next year he decided that he was going to drop the zoology, doctor of zoology, drop his zoology career and become a software developer. And he's actually a great software developer. So you can switch your career at any point in time. And technology is a career that I think you really should really think about if you're not thinking about it earnestly. So, all right. That's kind of all I have. Do you have any questions? Is it actually time for questions, or should I?
We can do it together once.
Okay. All right. I'll just sit down. All right.
All right. I know that Tom is not. Am I allowed to call you Tom now, by the way?
You can call me whatever you want.
All righty. Big Daddy. I know that. I know that he is not, in fact, the admissions person anymore because we had a Yankees fan over here, and that would never have happened on Tom's watch. But anyway, I definitely share a lot of sentiments that Bennett had as well. So I thought, to myself on the drive over here, how would I break up what I was going to say? I guess I'll probably tell you a little bit about how I got to where I am and then kind of discuss, what it is I do and maybe some parting wisdom if I have any of that. So when I left here, I don't know, in 2010, I taught for 3 years. And I can distinctly remember on numerous occasions thinking to myself, I could never do anything with computers, how ridiculous. I'm a philosophy major, and probably some of you have that similar mentality. I had that mentality right up until I found out that Dorothy, my wife, was either pregnant with our second child or we had just had our first, and then I realized I can't teach anymore, I need some money. So I decided that, I would figure out a way to make that money. And now, don't get me wrong, there are definitely numerous ways to make money. But like Bennett said, technology is here in all capacities. It doesn't matter who you are, there's a way to make money in it. It doesn't matter what you do, right? So anyway, what I did next, I kind of took a circuitous route, right? So now I'm a software developer. I work for Capital One as a software developer, doing various software development things. But prior to that, I decided I'd go back to school because I just really didn't know what to do, right? I was like, crap, like what am I going to do? So I remember talking to Dorothy, and I was like, I'm going to be an engineer. Because prior to actually coming to Christendom, I had accepted, I had accepted to go to the Maritime Academy back on Long Island, which is where I'm from. But then once I met Tom McFadden over there, I decided I'd come to Christendom. So anyway, so after I decided to go back to school, I took a bunch of classes. I was still teaching at the time, and then I went to George Mason full-time. While I was there, I had taken a job with SAIC, which is a huge government contractor in this area. Don't hold that against me. But anyway, while I was doing that, they decided that they would pay for school, so I kept working for them. It was kind of a quid pro quo. Anyhow, I finished that, and while I was at GMU, there was a gentleman there named Andrew Lurch, who was the head of the systems engineering department, who approached me and he said, hey, you're going through all this bachelor's degree nonsense. You don't really need to do that. We can just pump you through the master's program. It'll be quicker, way cheaper, and you'll be out in no time. I said, great, that sounds good, as long as I'm going to make money. So that's what I did. And I have to say, based on that retrospectively, while going to school was kind of like a catalyst to actually getting into software development, I really don't think it's necessary. I've had a couple of questions from prospective students here and current students here asking me hey, do I need to go to school, or I'm thinking about going to school, where should I go, what should I do? And my advice to you would be don't go to school. Go to Christendom. You don't need to go to graduate school. There's really no reason. Now, granted, I suppose if you're working for a company or something and you decide years later, oh, hey, I'd really like a master's degree in computer science or something like that, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with actually going to school and attaining those things, but you should go and get some experience first, right? Those things are good to do. And had I known better at the time, I think I probably would have maybe gone that route, but I didn't, so what can you do? So anyway, I worked for SAIC for a little while, and then I worked for this other government contractor out in Sterling, Virginia called FTS International. I did that for a little while and then just couldn't do the government thing anymore, so that was it for me. And then I took this job with Capital One, which I've enjoyed quite a bit. Anyhow, I think one thing that's important to understand, like Bennett was saying, is that I think anybody in this room could approach a career in technology without fear. There'd be no reason for you to be afraid of it. I can think of every major here at Christendom and apply technology to it in some particular way. So how many of you are math majors? Which is new, right? And I think, oh, nice, we got one more back there. So you, as a math major, you have to take, I don't know, I assume you have to you take differential equations, you take upper level mathematics, and you probably take some, calculus-based physics and all that kind of stuff, and that's really great. You could be a traditional engineer, I suppose, if you wanted to. I had one gentleman ask me a question. He was like, hey, I like engineering. I would first ask you, what kind of engineering do you like? Do you like mechanical engineering? Do you like electrical engineering? I worked in the aerospace business for a little while doing aerospace engineering. I have no business being an aerospace engineer, but that's okay. Most aerospace engineers don't either. So everybody's faking it. So anyway, So math is a pretty easy one to apply to, right? You could take your math homework, Dr. Townsend says, here, do these really hard differential equations and, solve these equations that really don't have a singular solution. And in his head, he's like, I'm going to get these guys, right? And then you come back with some computer simulation or something like, look, I solved the problem, and, he loves you. So, that's a pretty easy one. Or you could take your physics homework or something like that, and you could create, whatever computer program to solve those problems. It would happen very quickly. It'd be easy. You could do that. How many people here are English majors? Wow. All right, so that's a significant number of you. That's great. A big thing now, let me preface this by saying, if you go into Google, right, and you start typing in their little box, and you get all these selections and things like that, right? You get autocomplete and stuff like that, or now if you're in Gmail, it'll try to predict what you're going to say next, or in your text messaging, it's doing those things and compiling all this information about you and sending it to the government, But either way, that's another big thing, natural language processing, right? So what's required for natural language processing, I think, is not just the ability to program, but also the ability to understand language. And I will tell you something, that I've worked with a lot of traditional engineers and developers, and they are really bad at English. I mean, it is embarrassing how bad they are at English. So right there, you have a leg up on them. So you could probably do something really cool for one of your theses or something like that, where you did some, and actually, I think the same could be applied to philosophy, right? How many are philosophy majors? Cool, right? So I bet, especially for you modern philosophy fans and you Wittgenstein fans, I still remember a name or two. You could definitely take some of what I guess you understand there as far as language philosophy goes, and you could totally apply that in some natural language processing way. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I recommend you look it up. You could definitely apply that. Hand in hand with that is another buzzword, which is your machine learning engineers, right? And that's kind of the same thing. Those are people that are applying algorithms to huge sets of data and trying to come up with some trend or some analysis or something like that. Anyway, are there any majors I didn't hit? Oh, history, yeah. So history, how could you apply it to history? I mean, I don't know, I suppose you could do simple things. You could aggregate statistics over history or something boring like that. So sorry, history. Anyhow, the point is that it applies across the board, right? Now, I guess another thing that I was thinking about was the fact that I keep seeing all this stuff coming out of Christendom. It's like, oh, so-and-so is a doctor now, or so-and-so is a nurse, or so-and-so is a doctor now, or so-and-so is a nurse, or so-and-so is a doctor now. And it's like, that seems to be where everybody's going. And that's great. Being a doctor or a nurse or something like that is really a great thing to do. But I think, like Bennett said, you can still know technology in some way, right? In one of my first jobs, I had worked with a whole bunch of different older engineers. I mean, these guys were just crazy smart. They did a lot of signal processing. So, that stuff you get some electronic signals and you processing waveforms and things like that, trying to understand what it is that any of it means. I don't know what it means, but they did apparently. So I couldn't understand the physics and the math and the stuff that they were doing at their level because they were just crazy smart guys, right? But one thing that I think I brought to the table that they didn't was some of the more modern technology, right? Some of the understanding of how you program or whatever. That's something that they didn't have, and they were I hate to use this word because it's probably a little strong, but they were starting to become irrelevant. And in some ways, if you don't start to pick those things up, you do start to become irrelevant or obsolete, right? So while you are a doctor or a nurse or something like that, those are definitely things that you could probably find a way to incorporate into your daily life. And I guess another thing just on all of the different professions that people come out of Christendom and they seek out, what am I going to do, right? That's like a perennial question. What are you going to do? I think that when you think about technology, you get scared of it, right? Because you don't know it, right? You don't really know it. You know being a doctor, being a nurse, being a garbage man, being a teacher very well because you're surrounded by those things and you see them every day. You kind of understand what the cadence is and like what is it like. But technology you don't really know because you're here at Christendom and you're not really using those things, right? I don't know if Dr. Townsend or does Dr. Byers still teach here? Awesome, man, she's awesome. I failed one of her classes, so I got a D actually. Yeah, so I don't know if they make you do any labs or things like that, but that would be a great way for you to maybe start picking up some programming. Like, hey, maybe can I try this out or something like that. But anyway, more back to my point, which was, those are things that you don't know, and that's fine. It's okay not to know things, but if you don't ever try to know it and try to experience it, then you're still never going to know it, right? You're going to be living in ignorance of those things and of those concepts. But that doesn't mean that anybody here can't do it. I think Bennett started hitting on this point, is that what software engineering is now, or development, or whatever you want to call it, is basically taking parts and creating a whole. That's all you're doing. I'm sure you probably hear that all the time in philosophy. It's like taking parts to a whole, or blah, 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 and like all those different human nature concepts and logic concepts, right? You're basically aggregating systems or aggregating pieces of some giant system, and you're making them work together. So I think the difference is between a Christendom, graduate, and somebody who there are many differences, but one of the differences between a Christendom graduate and maybe somebody with a computer science degree is the fact that, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way, I mean this, very seriously, because it was the case of me as well. You don't have any practical skill. Like, you have no practical knowledge, right? And that's fine, but you need to go and you need to seek it out and you need to get it. And I think I keep saying and I think, so one trend that I've noticed, especially in probably the Millennial Generation, as it is so called, or in the younger generations, is this idea that you're just going to kind of sit back and wait for things to be imparted upon you, right? Like, you sit in class and you're like, I'm here at class, now I will be smart because Dr. Cutterback is going to take knowledge and stick it in my head. And that's partially true because he's so intimidating that it couldn't but get into your head, unless you were asleep like I usually was. So in any case, you have to go and you have to try, right? Like, after Dr. Wunsch or whoever is done teaching, you have to go back and you have to study. You have to try to understand what it was that they were telling you, because you're not just going to get it one time. And that's the same with anything having to do with technology, because you don't know it. So you need to go and try to know it. And it's really painful at first. It's actually like horrible. I remember starting out, the first language I programmed in was Python, and I had to do this to do which is like actually it's kind of a pretty trendy language now. It's a good one. I do more like web stuff, like data and AWS and things like that. But in any case, I remember just sitting there thinking, like, what does any of this mean, right? Like, you'd write some code and then it would fail and you would say why, and you would have no idea why, and you would feel like you just spent hours and hours and hours failing and failing and failing. And I kid you not, like, I probably have failed for like a cumulative 100,000 hours. And while that's kind of like it's probably not an exaggeration actually, I think that's the way you become an expert, is by failing 1,000, 100,000,000 times. Like, you just have to keep failing. And the good news is that once you do that, it really doesn't actually take that long when you think about it. I mean, you guys graduate from here and you're so young, right? You're going to be 21, maybe 22, maybe some of you will be a little older, like in your later 20s, but that's still really young. I mean, I stopped teaching and I think I was like 24, and at the time I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so old, but you know, now I think that was no big deal. So you have to be willing to put in the time, and you have to be willing to embrace the fact that you are going to be an absolute failure. But only by failing are you going to be a great success. And if you're not willing to fail, then you're not cut out for this career. You're just not, right? But if you're willing to tinker and to like figure things out, then you are. You know, it'd be like your lawnmower's broken and you can either A, try to fix this thing and spend, you know, a whole day not fixing it until you finally do, only to have to wait till the next weekend to actually use it. But then the next time it breaks, you're going to know exactly what happens. Or you can B, throw it out and go to Home Depot and spend, you know, $400 on a new one. Or C, you can take it to some, you know, mechanic and never understand anything about the lawnmower, right? So the choice is failure, right? So the choice is yours. Basically, you know, you can try, and if you have an interest, you can spend the time to actually try to understand what it is you're getting yourself into. The other thing I'll say is that with technology, technology is really broad, and it's similar to probably saying I'm a doctor. That's also broad. You're a doctor of what? You know, in technology, you can be just somebody who does, you know, you write one-off programs or something like that, right? Like somebody has a problem to solve, you want to write some program, you want to solve it. You want to be a web developer, right? So you want to write stuff that executes in the browser, some really cool stuff. You want to write some web application, something that probably transfers data back and forth. You want to start developing on like old school Linux machines or something like that, or you want to be a cloud developer, like Bennett was saying. Yeah, anyway, I could keep going on, but your possibilities are infinite, which is one reason that I think I like it so much is because I'm never bored. Like I am never bored at work. There's always a problem to solve. And if there isn't a problem to solve, I guarantee that you can find one, which is great. So that's really nice. Anyway, like I said, the point is that choice is yours. It's difficult, but I think it's definitely, the payoff is high. And then I think, just finally to wrap up, because I'm definitely talking too much, if you want to get into it, you can do it now. And in fact, the time is now. How many of you are seniors? Oh, okay, so most of you. How many of you are juniors? And I guess no sophomores or, okay, awesome. Freshmen? You're in the best position. You are, because you can start today. After I'm done talking, you can go back to your dorm room and start programming if you don't already do that. And you can figure out ways just to tinker. You think about that, like Bennett said, how much time do people waste doing this nonsense? It is a waste of time. And, obviously you have to probably find out what's going on with mom at home or something like that, or, silly pictures of your dog on Facebook or whatever it is that you're into. Although I think cats, actually. There's a funny website that my brother had texted me. It's called lolcats.com, so if you're in for a good laugh. Anyway, you have 4 years ahead of you where you can go ahead and you can just incrementally fail for these 4 years so that when you graduate, you're going to be a success. And people are like, I want to hire that guy. And another thing pretty important, I think, actually is popular in the development world is that it really doesn't matter, and this kind of goes back to the point I was saying about going to school, it doesn't matter what your degree is. People less and less care about that. I mean, especially one last job I had, I was hiring some interns, and some of them had these computer science degrees, some of them had engineering degrees, and the guys I worked with were older engineers. They're like, oh, they have an engineering degree, we need to hire them. I was like, I don't want to hire them. They can't do anything. Like, they're useless to me. Like, I don't need useless people. I need people who can do things, you know? So we had some guy who was actually, I think, a philosophy major, oddly enough, and it was great. You know, I had some other engineers and they were great too, but more to the point is you want people who are doers, right? So if you have 4 years, 2 years, 3 years, 1 year left here, spend the rest of that year profitably. You know, if this is a career you're thinking about, then go to the internet and you can Google how to do X, how to program in X, and I guarantee you an abundance of things will come up. Had I been a little bit more prepared, I suppose I could have come up with a nice jazzy flyer with some of those resources, but one big thing, I don't know, I know you guys do like career development stuff or something like that now, where you probably make some, I don't know, like LinkedIn profile or something like that. Anyway, I'm not a LinkedIn person, but you know, there is basically like a developer social media world, right? Where you can go on to github.com and you can profile all of the different stuff that you've programmed, right? You just basically put up some code, you can, you know, run it on the internet or whatever, for lack of a better term. And that's kind of like something that I would look for in a resume, right? So if somebody sent me a resume and they said, hey, I want to be a developer, I want to do X, Y, and Z, that's something that I would look for, right? I'd see, okay, where'd you work? What's your experience? Did you go to school? Yes or no? I don't really care. Do you have a GitHub profile or something like that? Something that I can look at to see that you can prove to me that you can actually do the work. Because, it's a funny story, one instance of where that didn't work out was this one guy had applied for a job and he said, hey, yeah, I can write programs in C++. And they're like, all right, great, you know, and went through the interview, and I guess they must not asked him too many questions about it, because he comes to his first or second day of work and they say to him, all right, hey, you know, we need you to basically write some program in C++. And he's like, I can't do that. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, that's what we hired you for. He's like, no, man, I said I can run programs in C++. You know, so he could basically press like go, and that was it. So anyway, so that's one thing. You want to get on there. You want to put any code that you possibly can up there, right? And when I say any code, I mean any code, right? You write some code, you put it up there, you make it better. You spend the time, you go back, you refine it. You just want to show people that you are interested and that you are interesting and that you actually have a desire to make that work. Once you do that, you go and you apply for any possible internship you can get. If you get the crummiest internship at some mom and pop shop, just writing some code and doing it, fixing computers, it doesn't matter. You need to take that, right? Don't go home and sleep until 1 o'clock in the afternoon and then play video games for the rest of the day. You know, go out and get a job, right? Like, I used to go home, I used to work at the deli back home on Long Island. Actually, I still can remember the first day that I came down here and I went into town to go get I'm from Long Island, so I went to go get a sandwich, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go find a deli. And I drove around for like an hour, like where is the deli? And there wasn't a single deli. And sure enough, there's not. Maybe it's changed since I've been here, but I doubt it. Anyway, those things are good, right? You want to make money. I'm sure a lot of you are probably paying your way through school, so it's important that you do that. And so while that is laudable and that is good, and if you can't do anything else, then you definitely need to do that. But if you can get yourself hooked up with an internship or at least some real experience, you should do that too. Even if in some way, like, you find something that's not paid, it almost doesn't matter, right? Like, you need to get yourself some experience. Thirdly, you need to just find problems to solve. It doesn't matter what those problems are, right? Your mom says, oh, I need to schedule the times I'm going to do the laundry or something like that, and somehow you write a computer program to figure that out. I don't know. Something to, like, help yourself to learn how it works, because a lot of what programming is just syntax. We all speak English. Some of you probably speak other languages, and you did that simply by learning the syntax of those other languages, right? And that's what a computer is. You're telling a computer to do, you need to learn how to tell it what to do. And so you need to find something to tell it to do, and then figure out a way to speak that language, right? So if you do those couple of things and you do those over at your time during your time in Christendom, then you will be well on your way and well prepared to graduate from here and to possibly come out with a good position if that's something you're interested in. If not, that's also no big deal. I mean, either way, it wouldn't be time lost. You would have learned something that is ubiquitous. So anyway, if you take nothing else from me, go on to GitHub, start learning. Go on to Google, find some courses to take or some tutorials, some YouTube videos, some Udacity videos, these different things. Once you do that, start applying for jobs, get a job, and you will be successful. Thank you.